Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the US. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the US and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thanks, Jim.
Hurricane Harvey. People talk about global warming, climate change, and so on, and that might be responsible. However, you have a different point of view here about the victims, all the flooding. What could be behind that flooding?
Yeah, I think, we certainly can't dismiss the changes to climate that are real and happening in the world around us. It's tempting. You see this on TV news all the time of pinning the blame for some storm, some major event somewhere in the world on climate change. I think the fact of the matter is those changes are of a very slow incremental nature, and we do see as habitat shifts, we have plants and animals that over time move from one place to another. We have changes in the vegetation on the land use, and those are real. But what people do in how they live is often a bigger factor when it comes to a specific disaster, like we're seeing on the Gulf Coast of Texas right now with Hurricane Harvey. And it's just very simple. You see it in Bangladesh too. You see it in Florida. It's where people choose to live in large numbers, and they haven't made necessarily the best choices about how they do that exposes them to danger when these big weather events happen.
If you go and build on a floodplain, there's a reason it's called a floodplain, right?
Well, that's right. And a lot of these houses that have been flooded in Houston right now were deliberately built in places that everyone knew perfectly well were floodplains. They've been extending habitation into the Bayou regions around suburban Houston. Not surprisingly, it's often the poorer people and neighborhoods that are located in those areas. There was one lady they interviewed who said, we live 4 feet below sea level and we're flooded. We're not too surprised. Well, the surprise is not that it's happened. It's that people continue knowing this to build more and more homes in those areas. And, the problem in Houston is a pretty basic one. They don't have zoning regulations.
Well, I take a look here in the lower mainland of Vancouver. Richmond is below sea level for 11 hours a day. The city manager got mad at me when I said they live below sea level in Richmond. And he says, no, Jim. For 13 hours a day, we're above sea level. The city's protected by huge dikes, but if there's an earthquake, will those dikes hold?
Yeah, well, I've got to watch this right twice a day, so I guess it's in that same area of logic that he's using there, is it?
Yeah, you're just hoping the earthquake hits when you're above sea level? Would you accept a bet on a roulette table that gave you those kind of odds? Of course you would. That's pretty good. But an earthquake and roulette are two different things.
Yes. If you look at a region like ours, I think you could say Richmond, all right, they've got the planning in place. They do have zoning that drives some types of use away from areas that are super high risk. But if you look at what they've got down in most parts of the U.S. coast, I think they have to start thinking about doing things differently because it's just not sustainable. And if they continue over time to keep adding thousands of new homes every year into those areas, willy-nilly, just wherever a developer wants to, the way that one scientist put it was the real estate developers, they want to have a one-night stand with Texas, whereas the people who care about the future, they're worried about what does it mean for their grandchildren that they have, a safe place to build their homes.
Should government be more active in this? Also, the city of Vancouver has allowed development on the floodplain along the Fraser River. It's only protected by dikes. Dikes that I've seen breached by tugboats going too fast in their wake, slopping over the dike.
Yeah, well, the last big flood we had, I believe, was 1948, and that cause some breaching of dikes, cause widespread flooding. I can't think of any reason why in future we wouldn't have a flood event where the Fraser River goes to the same or higher heights. It's likely to happen at some point in the future, and you've got to be wondering, what would that look like if we saw those conditions? Since that time, all sorts of mitigation efforts have been put into place. You can't just go and build a house somewhere in Richmond or Delta. You've got to go through and follow all of the rules, not just the zoning bylaw rules, but also all of the building codes that require you to build a certain way. You've got to be able to insure your home. And so it's pretty rigorous. And you think, okay, in Canada we're safe, we're modern, reasonable, we do these things. But then, hey, look at Calgary. I visited the home of a friend of mine, lives down by the Elbow River, which is one of the flooded rivers in the Calgary area. And there are these beautiful brand new homes lining the river. And you think, okay, well, if they've built them in the last 20 years, they must know that they're safe. Well, no, wait a minute. They got flooded a few years ago when the Bow flooded, and people had to, pump out their basements. It was pretty bad down there. So, I think there's a lot of risks that we do take in all kinds of areas, not just Texas. We see it in Calgary, and maybe we'll see it in Richmond one day.
Also, another big threat to the Lower Mainland is Mount Baker, an active volcano just on the other side in Washington State. It's an active volcano. It's got a 1,000-foot thick glacier. The big concern is the volcano goes really active, and the magma and lava melt that glacier, and that's going to put a wall of ice, snow, mud, trees, rocks sweeping down on the town of Abbotsford. Well, not town now, city of. And again, people living right along the river, any low spots in Abbotsford, well, Mount Baker may come visit as well.
And then up in the northern part, north of Squamish, you've got the area that is susceptible to a potential breach of the wall that would bring Garibaldi Lake down into the Squamish Valley. And that would be a big disaster too. Maybe an earthquake would trigger that. We've seen previous events. There's evidence of it in the Valley Bottom a couple hundred years ago where there was a massive flood event. So all around us we've got these dangers that lurk. You certainly hope they don't happen all at once or don't even happen individually.
Well, right now, most governments, if they were held responsible, have legislation that they could pass retroactively saying you can't sue us for the advice we gave you. The city of Vancouver itself, their charter was changed by Premier Gordon Campbell so that the city cannot be sued for giving you negligent advice. For example, a city engineer says your condo is perfectly good. You move in and it leaks. You can't sue the city of Vancouver for negligence.
Got to look somewhere else.
Right. And that's why other municipalities have been a lot tougher with condo developments because they know they can be sued.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, that explains a lot.
Should politicians be held accountable for letting people live in dangerous areas, or are you on your own recognizance?
Well, you have places, for example, Holland, where they've adapted themselves to live in a place that has got all sorts of dangers of flooding all the time, and not just 13 hours a day, but 24/7. And over hundreds of years, the Dutch have become, the people of the marshlands who've done an incredible job of building roads and buildings and doing so in a way that is going to be into the long-term future sustainable. And I think we need to bring more of that thinking into the Lower Mainland, where we also live partially in an estuary, and we choose to build below sea level in some cases, and yet, we're obviously not ready for some of the potential inundations that could happen. And, as they build new construction, I think they are paying a lot more attention to it, but, there it is in places that appear to be somewhat prone to risk. Are we doing enough?
Are municipalities addicted to development fees?
Well, they seem to be.
Because I take a look at how much money a city makes when they allow a bunch of low-rise, very affordable apartments to be ripped down and replaced by luxury condo towers. It's a huge windfall. It's probably the big reason why Burnaby has $1 billion plus surplus.
Well, they're also solving the affordability problem we've got by allowing that to happen. So, you've got to manage the pros and cons of whatever path you choose. They've got the transit infrastructure in place, and those nodes where you've got all of those towers coming up, they're providing a solution for people who want to be able to own their own home. So, there's that. But is it enriching the city? For sure it is.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. A work program is planned for our Finland property that contains diamond-bearing kimberlite. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ADD, and the Frankfurt Exchange, symbol 82A1. Please visit our website at arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, a green economy plan for British Columbia. Is it sustainable? Is it workable? Would it replace things like pipelines and natural gas development?
Well, I think we need more green planning. Whether we can do so getting away from things that we've used in the past, or we need to adapt and evolve with what's worked very well for us, is where a lot of the conversation is. And right now in the federal NDP leadership race, as they pick a new leader to replace Thomas Mulcair, they are starting to talk about this issue, and I find it quite interesting because, you hear a lot of positions. People are saying we've got to phase out fossil fuel using cars, gasoline cars, diesel cars, and replace them with some kind of new cars that don't have consequences for the environment. And, recently I was in Southern California. You go to a city like Los Angeles and, wow, the air there is not clean. And you look around, there's cars everywhere. You can't go anywhere without using a car. I mean, they're developing their metro system that's actually quite good, but still, there is a massive amount of automotive traffic there. The air is going to have to be improved. Electric cars could be a great solution for a place like LA. But you have to recognize when you do that, you are going to clean up the air, but you're also going to displace those emissions. So the electricity created for those cars has to be created somewhere else. And if it's going to be created using coal-fired plants somewhere else in the United States in the electricity grid they have, then that has consequences too. Not exactly the same consequences, because you could clean up the air in LA, but you could create more pollution somewhere else, maybe in Colorado or in Arizona where they put these plants in, or maybe you would put in a combination of coal, natural gas, solar, wind, whatever it is. It all has consequences. So, there's not an easy fix, but you hear people talk, like in the NDP race right now, when they say green plan, it almost exudes a halo. And you think, oh, thank goodness they've got a green plan, they'll be able to fix all these problems. Well, I think the reality is it's no easier to fix the problems if you cast yourself as being virtuous than it is if you just simply try to do the hard work needed to improve environmental performance and never cease to seek improvements.
What I find incredible is none of these electric cars I see commercially produced have solar panels on them. Why not?
That's an interesting point. Well, I guess you're driving them at night, those 12 hours of the day when there's no sunshine. Maybe that's part of it.
But, of course, if you park it outside during the day, it's charging, whether you're using it or not, or whether it's plugged in.
Well, I think you should consider putting a sail on your car, Jim, because that might add an extra maybe half a horsepower in high wind conditions.
I've thought about it.
Yeah. Oh, I bet you have. Well, between that and the solar panel, you can probably charge your phone for a couple of minutes.
Well, exactly. It might get you around the block. Vancouver, on the other hand, you have a distinct lack of service stations. There are none now in the downtown core. They've all been sold for real estate developments. So you might have to go electric and plug in at home.
Well, that I think is maybe where they want to go with that, and encourage apartments to have those electric charging stations. Or if you live in a single-family home, you'll have to figure that out for yourself probably. And maybe your parking lot at work has got some stations. And, there will over time likely be some adaptation and adoption of electric cars. I hear predictions from some that it's going to replace or it'll be forced that electric cars become the full fleet of ordinary motor cars. Trucks will probably be different for a long time to come. But I am still waiting for the evidence, because I tend to be a little skeptical about things, not because I'm hostile to electric cars. I'm not. I love them. But because people are not actually taking them up in the numbers required to bring about change. And you wonder why, because most of the things people do, the average person, they do because they thought through the consequences. If someone goes to buy a lottery ticket, it's a couple of dollars you're spending. But you talk to people about their choices with something like a lottery ticket, and you realize, wow, this person's really thought about which lottery they're playing, what day they're buying the ticket, what the number is, if they're choosing a number, about how they're allocating, that part of their out-of-pocket spending budget to buy that lottery ticket. You talk to people about, the mortgage that they're getting for the home that they're buying, and you realize every decision, a financial decision that people make, they put so much thought into it. And I think people put a lot of thought into vehicle decisions, and right now their conclusion is not interested in an electric car for Canadian conditions because of all kinds of reasons. And, it could be that there'll be a big herd movement that all of a sudden everyone will just flip and then everyone gets an electric car. That's possible. But I also am looking at a whole ton of innovation that's happening around conventional cars, where, you've got 6 or 7 major technology areas affecting your average gasoline burning car. Be it braking systems that store energy. You've got, turbocharging systems that are more and more efficient. You've got ways of recapturing the gases and the heat that escape needlessly from the exhaust system. Got all these things that are being evolved very quickly, and every time they tweak that, it gets better, and your car uses less fuel, so it's cheaper to run, and it's also more environmentally friendly. So, I don't think you necessarily have to see a conventional car as being a great evil. I think it can be a source of increasing good if you're never content, to stop. You're never going to stop seeking better performance, which is what we're seeing now.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead zinc silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineer gold mine in the Atlan district of northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're chatting with Stewart Muir. Stewart, what's the latest developments on BC's 2 largest projects, Trans Mountain and the Site C Dam?
Yeah, well, we've got some news from both of those this week. On Trans Mountain, we have a federal judge who has weighed in on British Columbia government's effort to try to stop or stall that Trans Mountain project. And then we've also got on Site C, the hydro dam in northeast BC, we've got a UN panel, United Nations panel, that is seeming to want to stop Canada from developing its clean energy options despite the Paris Agreement on climate change. And so these are in the news this week, and I think it's interesting because these are the biggest projects in the BC economy right now, biggest single projects. They create thousands of jobs. They also are aimed at the resource industries that create so much of the social benefit that we get. Our schools, our hospitals are paid for by projects like that, and the electricity that it comes from Site C will enable us to run society. So these are really important. Maybe there's kind of boring big projects, but they do as we see them move towards completion, I think they will continue to attract a lot of attention. And this week was interesting for them.
Trans Mountain was supposed to start construction on the pipeline in September. How much will that be delayed by the court case? Could it be delayed for years?
Well, I think the legal strategy of those who are mounting these cases is to use our legal system to delay. And whether or not the court eventually rules in their favor is, one question, but not the only question. It's can they use our courts to stop things from proceeding quickly? And not all judges find it amusing to see such cases enter the courts. And we've seen the BC government attach itself to a case and be granted intervenor status in one case involving the First Nations challenge to the Trans Mountain project. And in approving that intervenor status, the judge was quite harsh about it. He felt that a number of aspects of BC's motion were unsatisfactory. They felt that after all of this rhetoric, the BC government took a long time to file its motion. It didn't explain why it took so long. The court said that the submission was vague, imprecise, and maybe BC doesn't even understand the ground rules for entering a process like this. So quite sharply critical of how the new government in Victoria has approached this.
And is this a cynical operation where they're trying to piggyback on the case being presented by the First Nations?
Well, yes, and you have to give them in Victoria credit because they are delivering on a promise. They said they would use every tool in their toolbox to try to stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline, which they oppose, from proceeding. And this appears to be one of those tools. They've chosen the First Nations to be a tool of one political party's agenda, and the judge has apparently accepted their bid to be involved in this case. So, we'll see how it goes. Are they merely looking to satisfy an election promise? The fact is that if you're a unionized worker in Western Canada today, and you work in construction, you build things, you work in operations of plants, you actually do depend on things like the Trans Mountain pipeline. It creates a lot of jobs for people who make the pipeline. There's companies in Saskatchewan doing that. If you're a unionized electrical worker in northern Alberta, you might live on Vancouver Island or the Lower Mainland, and then you fly to your job in northern Alberta to work on the oil sands. That's what supports your family, and you might make $150,000, $200,000 a year. That's the kind of job that the BC government doesn't want to have in the economy, which is pretty incredible because they historically, at least, have relied on trade unions to be a core part of their support. So the whole thing to me is a little bit puzzling, but obviously there is a political context for it.
Why would a UN panel oppose the Site C dam, something that would provide clean energy?
Well, again, that's a bit of a mystery. I mean, there's a panel there. It seems to come more from the indigenous side of the UN rather than the climate change. Now, the climate people, they want Canada to move forward with developing a clean energy economy. Site C is clearly part of that. The federal provincial panel that gave its blessing to the concept in 2014, although it questioned the economics of it, it said that this is the way that we can anchor future clean energy, renewable energy projects in wind and solar and geothermal, things like that. Having Site C provides a reliable base. It's always there to provide electricity, and then we can build on it. The importance of that in getting our electricity supply away from things like coal, which spits a whole lot of stuff into the air, even if they're using the best processes that we've got today. And so it's clearly desirable to use hydro. But then this other panel that's come out, it seems to have a different perspective. It says that Canada should do things differently when it comes to getting free, informed, and prior consent from Aboriginal people. Now, it's interesting. A lot of countries in the UN and on that particular panel do not meet our standards, Canadian standards of respecting human rights, but they are saying that we should do things their way. Now, if we did things the way that Russia does, I think that you probably wouldn't even see in the news ever, because it would just get built without anyone thinking about it. It would just get done. And I certainly wouldn't advocate for that. So I think when we hear, a panel like this, it's very political. They are advising a country that is a leader in global best practices like Canada to not develop clean energy. I think it's something you have to be fairly suspicious of. Why would they be doing this? I don't think that it is, going to be something that affects the sober, sensible people in Canada who make decisions about things. It's, good to have more voices in it, but ultimately, if we want to have a clean energy economy, we want to have affordability so that we can have a continuation of today's utility costs rather than spiraling costs in the future, which is what the UN panel would imply we need to have. Then I think we just need to get it done. And, today, this week, we're seeing a next step forward in the Site C review process, going to the BC Utilities Commission. We've got different interested parties are submitting their point of view, getting their 2 cents in so that this body can fairly quickly come to some kind of determination as to, what the BC government should do going forward with Site C.
Stewart, always fun chatting with you.
Likewise.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our very popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. You might find the quality there extraordinary as well. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.